Ladies and gentlemen, if someone has gone quiet on you, stop waiting for an explanation. That silence you keep trying to decode, it is the explanation. They've already made a decision about you. They just didn't have the courage to say it out loud. But here's the truth. You don't need their words to validate your worth. You don't need their message to move on. Because silence isn't confusion, it's clarity. And today I'm going to show you why that silence is your sign to stop waiting and start walking. When someone goes quiet, it's easy to fall into the trap of assuming they're just busy, overwhelmed, or unsure of how they feel. We start to fill in the blanks, giving them benefit after benefit of the doubt. But the truth is, silence isn't a placeholder. It's a statement. It tells you everything you need to know if you're willing to stop hoping for a different answer. People rarely go quiet when they're deeply invested, when they care, or when they're afraid to lose you. Silence is not confusion. Silence is not uncertainty. It's not a test you need to pass. It's clarity, just not the kind you wanted. It's a form of closure that doesn't come with a conversation. There's something deeply human about needing words to feel okay. We want to be told where we stand, how someone feels, and why they changed. But in waiting for those words, we ignore the truth that was already communicated through silence, through absence, through disengagement. We think if we just hang in a little longer, the conversation will happen, the clarity will come, and things will go back to how they were. But that's not how emotional maturity works. People who care show up. People who want to keep you in their life don't risk losing you to a guessing game. If you're sitting in confusion, wondering where you stand, it's not because the signs aren't there. It's because you're avoiding the GN that matters most, the lack of effort. Silence is not softness, it's not a passive state, it is an active form of withdrawal. It is the choice to no longer contribute to the connection, to step away emotionally without having the courage or care to say it out loud. And yet, we make excuses. We think they're being distant because they're scared or struggling or not good at communication. But someone who values a relationship, even in fear or hardship, finds a way to stay connected. Silence isn't about ability, it's about priority. People make time for what they care about. They make space for the relationships they want to nurture. If they're not reaching out, if they're quiet for days, weeks, or more, it's because they've already made a choice. The most painful part isn't their silence, it's the story you write around it. You tell yourself they're coming back. You convince yourself this is temporary. You think if you just stay calm, be patient, or show them more love, they'll re-engage. But that turns your heart into a waiting room for someone who isn't coming. You put your life on pause, holding out for someone who has already moved forward in theirs. You deserve someone whose actions are loud with presence, not absent in excuses. Clarity doesn't always come with words. Sometimes it comes in the deafening quiet of someone no longer choosing you. There is strength in seeing silence for what it really is, a decision. It's not rejection in the traditional sense, but it is a turning away. It's not loud, not dramatic, but it's deeply definitive. When you realize this, you begin to reclaim your own emotional space. You stop wondering what you did wrong and start recognizing what they failed to do right. You begin to see that love isn't silent, interest isn't vague, care doesn't disappear without explanation. You stop needing someone to confirm what's already obvious and start building boundaries that don't require explanation either. You begin to heal the moment you stop needing their words to validate your worth. You no longer measure your value by someone else's inability to communicate. Silence is about them, not you. Their failure to show up says nothing about your heart, your beauty, or your capacity for love. What it does say is that they lacked the depth, the courage, or the maturity to match the kind of connection you're capable of. And you're not meant to shrink yourself just to stay in someone's life. You're meant to stand tall in your standards and walk away from those who can't meet them. There's a kind of freedom that comes when you no longer chase clarity from someone who has already given you all the clarity you need. You start to understand that the silence was never about confusion, it was about avoidance. They weren't unsure, they were unwilling. And that unwillingness is your answer. You no longer need to decode mixed signals or search for hidden meanings. The message is clear. If someone wants to be in your life, they won't be silent. If someone sees your value, they won't risk losing it to silence. And so the question is no longer why are they quiet, but why am I still holding on to someone who's gone quiet? The longer you wait for someone to speak, the longer you delay your own healing. You deserve to be with someone who doesn't make you question where you stand. Someone whose presence is consistent, whose effort is ongoing, and whose words match their actions. Let silence be your signal, not your confusion. Let it be the line in the sand that helps you step back into your own power. Let it be the end of the wait and the beginning of your self-respect. Because ultimately, the choice isn't theirs anymore, it's yours. You can keep waiting for someone to break the silence, or you can use that silence as the loudest reason to move forward. This isn't about bitterness or resentment. It's about acceptance. It's about recognizing what is no longer being offered and choosing not to settle for less. You are not asking for too much. By wanting communication, clarity, and consistency, you are simply asking the wrong person. And that realization can be the very thing that sets you free. It's not easy. There's grief in letting go of the hope that someone might return, explain, or make things right. But there's also relief in finally closing the door that's been half open for too long. You don't need to hear their voice to have closure. You just need to listen to what their silence already told you. That message, though painful, is powerful. It's your cue to stop waiting, start healing, and choose yourself. Because when someone goes quiet, the decision is no longer up to them. It's now in your hands. And the most loving thing you can do is walk forward. Not because they left, but because you chose not to stay where you're not being met. We often find ourselves lost in the gray areas of someone's behavior, especially when silence creeps in where connection used to live. That sudden pullback, the unread messages, the long delays in replies, they send us spiraling into analysis mode. We start rereading old conversations, searching for clues we might have missed, asking ourselves what we said or didn't say. But what if the truth is simpler than that? What if the silence isn't a puzzle to solve, but a clear answer in itself? Sometimes we don't want to accept the answer because it doesn't match the outcome we were hoping for. But the moment someone stops showing up, stops engaging, and stops participating, they've already communicated something important, just not with words. Trying to get more out of their silence only drags you deeper into confusion. You can't force clarity out of someone who's chosen not to give it. We grow up learning that communication is key, that words help us understand each other. But what we aren't always taught is that inaction is communication. The lack of effort speaks just as loudly as any confession. When someone is no longer invested, they rarely say it outright. They let their silence do the talking. And yet we wait, we give time, we rationalize, we hope. We think they just need space, or they're going through something, or they're testing us. But the truth is, someone who genuinely wants to understand you, connect with you, and be with you won't gamble with silence. They won't risk losing you to a guessing game. Their desire to keep you will always override their fear or pride. If they're quiet, they're not trying to work things out. They've likely already checked out. There's a difference between someone needing a moment and someone disappearing into silence. One is rooted in healthy self-awareness. The other is rooted in avoidance. When someone values the relationship, even if they need space, they will tell you. They'll reassure you that the silence isn't personal, that they're not walking away. But when silence arrives with no explanation, no sign of effort, no reassurance, that's not temporary distance, that's emotional detachment. That's when you have to stop chasing clarity and start protecting your peace. You don't have to stay in limbo while someone figures out what they want. You don't have to earn someone's voice. If you have to beg for communication, the connection was already one-sided. The longer you wait for someone to explain their silence, the more you betray yourself. You put your life on pause, your joy on hold, your self-worth in their hands. You shrink yourself to fit the quiet, trying not to disturb the silence in hopes that it will break gently. But what if the silence never breaks? What if this is the answer? You can keep holding your breath, waiting for a message, a call, a moment of vulnerability. Or you can exhale and realize that someone's unwillingness to speak is not a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of their inability to meet you where you are. You deserve someone who doesn't go quiet when it matters most. Chasing clarity from someone who's gone quiet is like chasing a shadow. You'll never catch it, and in the process, you'll lose sight of yourself. You begin to build stories in your head about what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they meant. You try to read between lines that were never written. This constant need for interpretation becomes exhausting. It drains your energy, your confidence, your joy, and worst of all, it makes you believe that if you just do a little more, wait a little longer, stay a little quieter, they'll come around. But clarity doesn't come from silence. It comes from action. It comes from presence. And someone who chooses silence is choosing not to give you that. Sometimes silence is strategic, not in a manipulative sense, but as a way to avoid confrontation or responsibility. It's easier for some people to disappear than to be honest. They'd rather fade out than face the discomfort of saying, "I'm not in this anymore." And while that may protect them from guilt, it leaves you with emotional debris to clean up. But just because they didn't say the words doesn't mean you didn't get the message. You have every right to treat that silence as a conclusion, even if it didn't come in the form of a conversation. You're allowed to close a chapter that they refused to end properly. Waiting for someone to do the honorable thing doesn't mean you have to dishonor yourself in the meantime. There is nothing noble about holding space for someone who isn't holding space for you. You don't need to be endlessly patient to prove your love. You don't need to be the one who waits in silence just to seem strong. Real strength is knowing when to let go. It's recognizing when the effort is no longer mutual, when your energy is being wasted, when your art is being taken for granted. Silence isn't a challenge to overcome. It's often the end of the road. And the sooner you recognize that, the sooner you can begin to heal. You don't have to make a dramatic exit. You just have to stop waiting for an entrance that isn't coming. You might never get the words you were hoping for. No apology, no explanation, no closure. And that's painful, but you can give yourself closure by deciding that silence is enough of an answer. You don't need to understand their reasons to move forward. You don't need to hear their side to reclaim your peace. You don't need to solve a mystery that only exists because someone chose to leave you wondering. Their silence isn't your puzzle. It's your permission to let go, to choose your dignity over your doubt, to protect your energy from emotional ambiguity. Because love doesn't live in silence, it lives in intention. So don't waste your time translating silence into hope. Don't wait around for someone to do what they already chose not to. You don't have to beg for clarity when someone's actions, or lack thereof, have already spoken. When someone cares, they tell you. When someone wants to be in your life, they show up. And when someone is no longer interested, they disappear, often without warning. It hurts, yes, but it also sets you free. Free from wondering, free from waiting, free from the illusion that something might still be there. Let that freedom be louder than the silence ever was. You are not too sensitive for needing communication. You are not asking too much for wanting consistency. You are not overreacting for walking away from someone who won't speak up. Your desire for connection is valid and your time is valuable. Don't spend it decoding the quiet behavior of someone who has already chosen not to show up for you. Spend it nurturing relationships that make you feel heard, seen, and understood. Let silence be a teacher, not a trap. Let it guide you back to yourself. Because at the end of the day, the only clarity you truly need is this. If someone values you, you won't have to ask them to prove it. There comes a moment when you realize that the waiting is doing more damage than the silence itself. The uncertainty, the endless refreshing of messages, the mental loop of, did I do something wrong? It all eats away at your sense of self. It's so easy to fall into the trap of thinking that patience equals strength. But real strength is knowing when enough is enough. There's nothing noble about waiting for someone who's no longer showing up. The bravest thing you can do is recognize that silence is a decision and respond with one of your own. You don't fight for attention, you protect your energy. When someone pauses, withdraws, or goes quiet, it's not your job to chase. It's your job to notice the gap and decide if you still want to be standing in it. When someone stops communicating, we instinctively want to fix it. We reach out again, soften our tone, make excuses on their behalf. We think if we're understanding enough, gentle enough, or patient enough, they'll eventually come back around. But this mentality puts all the power in someone else's hands. It says, I'm here when you decide I'm worth engaging with again. That's not self-respect, it's self-sacrifice. The truth is, the longer you stay quiet in response to their quiet, hoping they'll fill the silence, the more you train yourself to tolerate emotional neglect. And the more you tolerate, the less you believe you deserve. So instead of matching their silence, match your values. If communication is important to you, let their absence be your exit. You don't have to wait for someone to explain why they stopped trying. You don't have to wait for someone to pick up the momentum again. If the effort has stalled, that's your sign. Not because you're giving up too easily, but because you're refusing to be left in emotional limbo. When people care, they don't answer. And let you hang in confusion. They don't leave space for doubt to take over. If someone pauses, if they go quiet, it's not a test, it's a truth. And your job isn't to prove your worth by waiting it out. Your job is to protect your peace by recognizing when your presence isn't being valued. Your strength is not in your ability to endure silence, it's in your ability to respond to it with clarity. Walking away isn't a loss when the silence was already stealing your joy. Every day you spend trying to read into the quiet is a day you give up on your own peace. You tell yourself stories to explain the distance. Maybe they're stressed, maybe they're overwhelmed, maybe they just need space. But while you're making excuses, you're also lowering your standards. You're teaching yourself to normalize absence in place of effort. But love doesn't vanish, interest doesn't fade without warning, and silence doesn't grow where connection is being watered. So instead of waiting for the noise to return, choose to leave the silence behind. Walk not out of bitterness, but out of self-preservation. There's a powerful shift that happens when you realize you don't need permission to walk away. You don't need a final conversation to justify leaving. Silence is permission. It's permission to stop fighting for someone who's not fighting for you. It's permission to step out of the uncertainty and back into your worth. And that's where real confidence comes from. Not in getting someone to come back, but in refusing to stay where love isn't consistent. You don't have to be loud in your exit. You don't have to explain why you're walking. The quietest decision you'll ever make, choosing yourself, will echo louder than anything they failed to say. Many people confuse patience with tolerance. They believe that waiting for someone to return to realize your worth is an act of love. But love, real love, is active. It shows up, it communicates, it doesn't leave you questioning. If someone needs time, they'll say it. If they need space, they'll explain it. Silence isn't a request for more time, it's a result of a choice. And when that choice leaves you in the dark, it's your cue to turn on the light and walk out of that room. You don't build love on silence. You build it on presence, effort, and mutual investment. Anything less isn't patience, it's pain dressed as hope. The more you respect yourself, the easier it becomes to walk away from inconsistency. You stop viewing silence as something to decode and start viewing it as something that disqualifies. Silence is not an invitation to prove your worth. It's evidence that someone isn't ready to meet you in the space you deserve. When you truly understand that, you stop waiting for potential and start demanding presence. You stop hoping they'll change and start realizing you don't have time to wait for someone to grow into what you already are. You've done enough waiting. You've done enough questioning. Now it's time for action. Not from them, from you. You can love someone deeply and still walk away from their silence. Love doesn't mean staying in situations that make you doubt your value. Love, when it's healthy, requires reciprocity. And if that reciprocity is missing, your presence won't fix it. Sometimes the most powerful expression of self-love is the moment you choose to stop trying. Not out of anger, not out of bitterness, but because you understand that your energy is a resource, not a sacrifice. It's not your job to fill the void someone else created. It's your job to recognize the void, acknowledge how it makes you feel, and choose better. Let go of the idea that staying means strength. In many cases, walking away requires more courage. It takes strength to step away from the comfort of what's familiar. It takes strength to accept that someone isn't willing to meet you halfway. It takes strength to say this isn't enough and mean it. You're not being dramatic. You're not being cold. You're setting a stance. Dard. And people who are meant to be in your life will rise to meet it. Those who don't are simply showing you that their silence wasn't temporary. It was honest. And your reaction doesn't need to be revenge. It can be respect. Respect for yourself, for your time, and for the kind of connection you're no longer willing to live without. Silence may feel like rejection, but it can also be redirection. It shows you where you were giving too much and receiving too little. It highlights where your standards were negotiable and where they need to be non-negotiable moving forward. And while it hurts, while it stings, it ultimately makes you stronger. You don't need someone to come back and make it right. You just need to move forward, knowing you handled the silence with grace, not desperation. That you walked away not because they left, but because you refused to stay in a place where your presence was no longer valued. And that decision, that quiet, powerful decision, is how you reclaim yourself. Rejection is one of the most painful experiences to sit with, especially when it comes quietly, without warning, without closure. It leaves you in an emotional limbo, questioning your worth and your place in someone's life. But what if rejection isn't the punishment it feels like? What if it's actually redirection, a subtle nudge steering you away from what you were never meant to cling to? Sometimes the people who disappear on us, who go silent, who pull away, are simply making room for something more aligned, more secure, more loving. It might not feel that way in the moment, but often the absence of someone becomes the space where your own clarity begins. Their lack of effort doesn't reflect your lack of value, it reveals their limitations. And in that awareness, you find the seeds of your freedom. It's natural to crave answers when someone pulls away. We want to know what changed, what went wrong, what we could have done differently. But the truth is, not all departures come with explanations, and not all rejection is personal. Often it has nothing to do with you at all. People leave for their own reasons, some rooted in fear, some in immaturity, others in timing. And while their reasons may never be spoken, their choice speaks volumes. Instead of turning yourself inside out for answers you may never get, consider what the silence gives you: an opportunity to realign, to let go, to stop fighting for something that doesn't reciprocate. Not every loss is a defeat. Some are simply course corrections in disguise. When someone decides to disengage, your instincts might push you toward proving your worth, showing them they made a mistake, or waiting for them to change their mind. But you don't have to prove anything. Your value isn't diminished just because someone failed to see it. Not everyone will recognize what you bring to the table, and that's okay. You're not meant for everyone. You're meant for the ones who do recognize you, effortlessly and without hesitation, the ones who don't need distance to appreciate your presence. Rejection reminds you to stop chasing and start receiving. You don't need to fight to be seen. You need only to protect your energy for those who see you clearly from the start. Pain has a way of distorting your perception, making you believe that the end of a connection means the end of your worth. But worth is not assigned by others. It's lived and embodied by you. You are no less deserving of love, consistency, or respect just because someone chose to walk away. In fact, their absence is proof that they couldn't hold what you carry. That isn't a flaw in you, it's a limitation in them. When rejection happens, it strips away illusions. It exposes misalignment. And although it hurts, it also liberates. Because in losing someone who wasn't willing to stay, you gain space to find someone who will. We often confuse emotional intensity with emotional connection. Just because sometimes Hing felt strong doesn't mean it was stable. Just because someone made you feel desired doesn't mean they were ready to commit. Rejection, especially the quiet kind, can be deceptive in its delivery. It leaves you wondering if it was real, if it mattered, if you imagined the whole thing. But here's the truth. If you were sincere, if you showed up with openness and heart, then it was real, even if the other person couldn't meet you there. And that reality doesn't become any less valid because they stepped away. Sometimes the most profound act of love is releasing the person who couldn't love you back in the way you deserve. You might be tempted to wait, to stay available in case they change their mind, to leave the door open just a crack in case they come back. But waiting keeps your heart in a holding pattern. It keeps you anchored to a story that's already ended. Rejection may have been their decision, but healing is your responsibility. And healing doesn't happen when you're standing still, hoping the past returns. It happens when you start moving again toward yourself, your peace, your future. There is so much power in choosing to move forward without resentment, not because you're unaffected, but because you value your well-being more than you value being chosen by someone who didn't stay. You are allowed to mourn what could have been, the potential, the plans, the vision you had for the two of you. But don't confuse mourning with waiting. You can honor your feelings without holding yourself hostage to them. Rejection hurts, but it's not a verdict, it's a redirection. It's life whispering, this isn't it. It's an invitation to look at what you've been tolerating, what you've been accepting as good enough, and ask, do I want to keep waiting for someone to see me? Or do I want to be with someone who already does? That question changes everything. It turns pain into power, loss into learning, rejection into realignment. It's okay to feel sadness. It's okay to feel disappointment. Those emotions don't make you weak, they make you human. But don't let them convince you to settle. Don't let your temporary grief convince you that you won't find something better. You will, but only if you stop reaching backward, only if you stop checking your phone for messages that aren't coming, only if you stop waiting for someone who chose silence to break it with sincerity. Rejection might have broken your rhythm, but it didn't break your ability to love, to connect, to heal. You are still whole, still worthy, still capable of something extraordinary. The beauty of redirection is that it puts you back in touch with yourself. It brings your focus back to what you want, not just what you were trying to maintain. Rejection is clarity. It clears space. It silences the noise of uncertainty and allows you to rebuild from a place of truth. It teaches you what kind of love you won't accept again, what kind of treatment you won't normalize, what kind of silence you won't misinterpret as care. And in that awareness, you become stronger, sharper, more selective. You start walking into rooms knowing your worth instead of waiting for someone else to confirm it. That's when everything starts to change. Eventually, you'll look back and be grateful for the rejection you once begged not to happen. You'll realize it was never about losing someone, it was about finding yourself. You'll see how that silence taught you to speak your own needs more clearly, how the distance taught you to set better boundaries, how the pain made you softer in all the right places and stronger in the ones that count. Rejection may feel like a closed door, but it's often the doorway to the life that was truly meant for you. So take the hurt, honor it, but don't stay in it. Let it shape you, not define you. Because forward is the only direction that will ever offer you the love that feels like home.